Let's welcome in legendary head coach Tom Osborne with us. And Coach, you certainly were involved in an awful lot of spring games, both as an assistant coach and then as a head coach. Tell us, how important were the spring games for your football team's success in the following fall?
Well, spring game is always very important for us because it was the culmination of spring football. And there was a time when we had 30 practices, and those were all in full pads. And then, of course, things got changed a little bit, more practices in sweat clothes, and I think they cut it down to 15. But the culmination of spring football was always a spring football game, and we thought it was always important to make it a real football game and had the crowd there. And because sometimes players perform pretty well in practice, but then the crowd makes a difference, and real game situations make a difference. And we always evaluated. Every practice was evaluated. And so the spring game was really critical because sometimes it came down to that last practice where we had 2 or 3 guys who had really performed almost equally throughout the spring at that given position. And it really serves as a springboard into the fall, because how you ended up at the end of spring ball was pretty much going to indicate where you started out in fall camp. But it's an intense competition, and so we felt it was a great tool for us as coaches to see who could really play and who's going to be second and third on the depth chart. And I'm sorry that this particular year we had this interruption, and I know it will be a significant loss in some ways. And hopefully there'll be some way we can make this up, either with some added practices in fall camp or maybe sometime in June, because it is something that's really critical to the players and the coaches.
Coach, I want to flash back to the 1995 spring game. You had just won the national championship in 1994 with a football team that was so good on the ground. And yet in that spring game in 1995, you had a lot of quarterbacks to work through, and you came out and threw the football quite a bit in that spring game. Talk about that game, and why did you change the play calling some in that spring game?
Well, the spring game going into the 1995 season was especially important because we had 2 quarterbacks who played really key roles for us in previous seasons. Tommy Frazier had missed most of the 1994 season with blood clots that went the full length of his leg. And he came in and he played in the bowl game, the Orange Bowl game against Miami, and he and Brooke Beringer actually shared time in that game. But it wasn't Tommy's fault that he was hurt. He had been a starter before that, and Brooke had led us to 7 or 8 straight victories into that Orange Bowl game and played a key role in 1994. And then, of course, we had Matt Turman, who had also played against Kansas State and several other key games when Brooke Beringer got hurt. We had Ryan Held, who is currently the backfield coach here at the University of Nebraska. And Scott Frost was coming back and was going to be pretty much ineligible that year, but he played. So we had a lot of really key performance in there. And the one thing that was different was that during that spring game, the assistant coaches on either side primarily called the plays. So there's a lot of passing that went on in that game because, as you know, I was a guy who was kind of stuck in the past and just a guy that wanted to hand the ball off, run the option or whatever. And so we had a lot of passes. I think we had over 500 yards passing in that game. And, of course, subsequently that team averaged, I think, 400 yards a game rushing the next fall. But in the spring game, quite a bit of passing. And I think the coaches are really trying to get a look at a lot of players and make sure the quarterbacks had a chance to show what they could do throwing the ball as well as running it. So it was a very interesting 1995 spring game.
Let's now take a look and listen to some of the highlights of the 1995 spring game.
High pro stat Huskers, 2nd and 7. 34.5. Snap to Behringer. Rolls right, drops back to throw. Goes long. He's got Gilman complete inside the 45. Inside the 20, and he's dragged down inside the 15-yard line of the 14. And what a big play guy. 4th and goal for the Whites at the 3-yard line, between the 3 and the 2. And Frost on a play fake, boots right, throws the ball in the end zone. Touchdown, Nebraska. The Whites score first. On the other end of that pass from Scott Frost was Tim Carpenter. They're 12, left side hash, quick count, snap, and the play fake, and Tommy to throw long down the left sideline. Got Clester Johnson deep, double covered. It is complete inside the 45-yard line of the Whites at the 44. Snap to Tommy on first down, drops back off the play fake, goes long to Reggie Ball, double covered, complete inside the 10-yard line. He's down to the 6. Throw set. Flanker left, split end right. Behringer takes the ball, runs an option play. He's on the keep all the way, turns the quarter inside the 30, the 25. He's going to go for the touchdown. Brooks Behringer, touchdown from 36 yards out. On 2nd and goal from the 17 of the Reds. The snap, catches it on his hip, throws it out there complete to Washington at the 10. He's to the 5. Great move in there for the touchdown. Standing up, Riley Washington.
4 wide receivers. And he throws the ball. Got Reggie. Reggie Ball gets about the 35, and he's going to score. 80-yard pass play.
I set 2 tight, split end right, Riley Washington. Joel Magovica and Sims in the backfield. Play fake to the tailback. Turman steps up to throw. Goes long, has a man deep. Riley Washington. Touchdown! Touchdown, Riley Washington. And a player's favorite, obviously, as well. Snap to Held. Reverses out. Option left side. On the carry. Pitches out to Knuckles. Got a block inside the 15, the 10, the 5. And he stretches and is hit down. Is short of the goal line.
We have a split end to the left. And Scott fakes a handoff, and he's throwing deep to number 3, who caught it for 10, 5, touchdown.
Good job.
How about that?
Riley Washington. Good job, Bill. Underneath center is Wood Rivers Frost, and they gave it to the fullback who broke it, and they go for the touchdown. Todd Euler, 50, 40, 35, 30. No piano on his back. Todd Euler with a touchdown of 89 yards. We have Barry Switzer now in the play-by-play.
Oh, they're playing. They're wrapping it up. There's Frazier throwing. He can't throw. He's throwing. Now he's got Reggie Ball.
Coach, you look back at that 1995 team, and you had 27 players on that roster that ended up playing in the National Football League. But you had an incredible crop of young players as well, and because of the wide margin of scores in the 1995 season, those young players got to play an awful lot of football. How valuable was that for their development?
Well, in that 1995 spring game, Greg, we had a lot of guys who were not necessarily going to play as starters the next year, but they were on that second team. And a lot of those young guys that were sophomores that year played mostly the whole fourth quarter, most of those games in the 1995 season. And those guys also ended up being starters on the 1997 team. And also Scott Frost was one of those players who started on that 1997 team. So that experience getting in that spring game in 95, I think, carried over and was very important in 96 and 97.
Coach, thank you so much for joining us. I know our fans always love hearing from you. We're glad you're doing well and always love catching up with you and your thoughts about Husker football.
Well, thank you, Greg. And I'd like to also thank the fans. You know, we've maintained that sellout streak since 1962. And you folks have been really critical and instrumental. You may not realize it, but when recruits come in, one of the things that really impresses them is that sold-out stadium and how long it's been sold out. And the fact that you are knowledgeable, that you're generally pretty good in terms of sportsmanship, and as a result, our fan base has been probably second to none. And so we just can't thank you enough for your loyalty and the fact that you've been so supportive over all of these years. Thanks again.